Good morning, Pelham Road. Well, I kind of left you with a cliffhanger yesterday, so we're going to come back and start there. I just read these again, reminding you of them. It is godly to heal the sick, godly to feed the poor, it's godly to work for justice, it's godly to protect the vulnerable. Now, the word godly, of course, well, it's a part of speech. I think it's the predicate in this sentence. It's an action. It's a declaration. To say that it is godly to work for justice, we're saying this is something godlike, but something we do. Godlike, but we do. So while God cannot protect the vulnerable, God cares for the vulnerable enough to ask us to protect the vulnerable. Now, Matthew 25 makes this about as clear as any passage in Scripture can make it. When the Son of Man comes in glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne, and all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people from one another, as a shepherd separates sheep from goats. And he will put the sheep on his right hand, the goats on the left. And then the king will say to those on his right hand, "Come, you, blessed of my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. You fed the poor. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, I was vulnerable, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." And then the righteous will say, "Well, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and fed you, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to visit?" And the king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whenever you did it to one of the least of these brothers and sisters, whenever you did it to one of the people who was sick or vulnerable or poor or in need of justice, whenever you did it to one of them, you were doing it to me." You see, God did not feed anyone. God did not clothe anyone. The sheep did that. When they offered the necessary compassion to their brothers and sisters, God's work was done. So that's me and you. So it is more accurate to say it is godly to work for justice. You know, God calls us to work for justice. If we don't, then this is the world we get. I mean, don't blame God for the injustice in the world. It ain't God's fault. He called me and you to do something about it. And we do something about it in a variety of ways. I have grown weary, and I think it shows, with people either waiting on God or blaming God. On one side, there are people who are members of this movement of God who wonder why the world is spinning out of control. Why does a rapist go free? Why people are sentenced to life in jail because they stole hedge clippers in Louisiana, and why there is rising poverty. And they can only lift their hands towards heaven and say, "Come, Lord, quickly." That's all they do. They see all the misery and they just say, "Lord, it's just getting out of control. Please come." I grow weary with that because Jesus taught us this prayer: "Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Until we modify our language to the second proposition, I think all we're doing is ruining God's good name. The reason why we like to go to this is because we can sit on our couch and do nothing. The minute we begin to understand that this is what we're supposed to be doing, Well, we know what we got to do then. Put on some overalls and go to work. And until we change our language to be this, we're just ruining God's reputation. See you tomorrow morning.